Everyone can see that? Seller Masterclass?
Yep.
Good. Do you like my little tagline? I was messing with it today, and there's no prizes for second place, right? The game of winning, right? We got to win the prize, and the way you do that is you stand out from the others. So many of you guys know what we're about, so I don't want to get too much into it. That's what our team looks like. We've been top 100 in Canada for the last 13 years. We've sold it just in listings, in the actual sale process, about $1 billion of real estate. And I've discovered, or I rediscovered, that the listing process is my passion. When I put this together, it's like, out of all the things in this business that we can do, this is the part that really gets me excited. And I've deconstructed it so much over the years. I mean, I think about what we've talked to people about in 2012 and 2014 and 2016 and 17, 18. And it's like, you can see the evolving message that we do for clients. Lots of 5-star reviews online. That's really what we try to do on our team. We're always aspiring to that 5-star experience, and we do that predominantly through education-based approaches, right? So I have a saying, surprises are for birthday parties, not for real estate transactions. So we talked about what you guys want to learn today. I love some of those ideas that you have. And I think, we've been running buyer classes for like 10, 12 years now. We've been doing investor classes for years. And it's like, I love hearing what you guys want to find out about, because that eventually becomes added to the classes and the, the stuff that we talk about. So what's the goal for everyone, right? They want it sold quickly and for top dollar. And so we're going to talk about how you do that today, but also things that people don't talk about that they should. And I've seen the other side of this is to stay safe, to avoid lawsuits, right? To have peace of mind, to do things properly so that you can sleep peacefully at night. That's a big part of it. I've seen, dozens of lawsuits over the years, within the brokerage and different people that have just gotten themselves in trouble because of not understanding how to do this properly. And I mean that by other agents too. And I'll show you some of the numbers that are extremely scary towards the end of the class, as far as how much experience most agents have. So if you've watched some of the promotion for this class, it's the 4 elements of selling. I came up with this about 7 or 8 years ago after really, again, deconstructing this whole thing. The first one is price. The second one is appearance. The third one is marketing, and the fourth one is timing. And if one of these is off, your results are going to suffer. Okay, so you could be well priced, you could have good market timing, you can have great marketing, but if your appearance isn't good, you're going to struggle. And if 2 or more of them are off, then you're probably never going to sell. Does that make sense, everyone? Yeah?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to jump right in and talk about pricing. And the interesting thing about pricing is that it can solve problems in marketing. It can solve problems with timing. So it's the one that more than anything else can fix all the rest. So how we look at market data is usually one of 2 things. We actually get our market data from the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board market report. They call it Market Watch. And then we put those into the Sold Watch. So if I was going to pull up the TREB data, I've actually got it open in another window. So TREB every month releases the stats from the previous month. And I find sometimes you have to know what you're really reading here for it to be useful. And so I'm going to show you quickly how I look at stats here. Okay, so the report is set up so that it has an intro page. And then it's got sales of different housing types. And what I find interesting about this, can you guys see this? Like, are you all on 3 big screens? Okay. So if you look at detached homes, for example, you can see there were a couple of detached homes that sold for 200, 300, 400. But the majority are $1 million to 1.5 million. That's the fat part of the bell curve right there. Right, in this area. And then if you look at semi-detached, the real fat part of the bell curve is between 900 and 1.25. Townhouses are between 800 and let's say 1.2. And then you find condo towns are somewhere around that 700 to 800 range, and then condo apartments are somewhere between $500,000 and $700,000. So if you're below or above that, it's going to change your game a little bit too. But then if you go further into the stats, you're going to see things like the total dollar volume, number of sales, the average price, the median price. So you guys know what median price means, right? If there were 100 sales, what they do is they look at sale 50 and 51, average that out. So it's the middle number as opposed to the average where you're taking the average across the whole list. So you'd take, you'd add all 100 sales and then divide by 100 to get the number for the average. The number of new listings. I don't like how they do sales to new listing trend, because what they do is they take the last few months. I look at it straight. So new listings and sales. So for example, in February, what we had in Milton was we had 256 homes enter the market and we had 151 sales. Okay, so the sales to new listings trend says 50%, but realistically, that's closer to 60%, okay, which is a more accurate read on the current temperature of the market. Months of inventory is a measure of the active listings over the number of sales, right? So what that measures, months of inventory, what it measures is if listings stopped coming out today, how long would it take to exhaust the current supply of listings? Does that make sense? Yeah. Average sale price to list price. So obviously if it's over 100%, it means the average home is selling above asking, but of course there's variation within there. And then these two numbers here came out a couple of years ago. They used to just list one. So this is the average listing days on market, and that's the average property days on market. So you'll see the property days on market is 50% higher in Milton. Do you know the difference? Does anyone know? No?
No. Chuck, I don't know what happened to my camera. It's facing away from me now.
Oh, that's fine. I have you guys just kind of off to the side, but
okay.
So the reason those two numbers are different is because a property sometimes, if it's not selling, they can relist it. So they would cancel the listing, they would put the new listing up. So what the property days on market is counting the total number of days it's been out. So it's like a cumulative total versus, like, I might have a home listed for a month and then I cancel the listing, put a new listing out, and then I sell it in a week. And so the property days on market would be 37, but then the listing days on market would be 7, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, good. So that's how you read the stats. And within this report, we've got all home types. We also have breakdowns based on, what do we have here? We have detached homes. We have semi-detached. We have all the different categories of homes. So that's all in the report. And then at the end of the report, we have a kind of a summary of average price. And it's pretty amazing that in 2011, the average price was $464,000. And then, 10 years later, we were more than double. So the market essentially more than doubled in 10 years. So cry for your kids, because it's not getting any easier, right? It's unfortunate. It's not. Okay. And then what we do is we put all of the stats into the Sold Watch report, and then that's where they come from, is the TREB data. And so we can start to see things like which property days on market are increasing, which ones are decreasing. So you can start to see trends there. We just came out with this new report recently. I'll talk about this graph because I think there's something really interesting when we talk about is spring the best time to sell. That'll come later in the presentation. So that's how we get our data, right? So things to consider when pricing. So the recent sales are going to give us goalposts, okay? Because there's no such thing, like anyone who comes to a seller and says your home is worth, and they give an exact number, I don't think they're doing service to that seller, because the truth is it's a little bit of an influx in motion kind of number. And there's also sales that would justify a higher price, and there's sales that have happened recently that would justify a lower price. So I call them goalposts. And when I meet with the seller, I'll say to them, look, if everything went very well for you, the high goalpost is this. If things changed a little bit or we weren't able to sell for the top dollar, here's the low goalpost, right? Does that make sense? In there, that's where we're shooting. And then the fine tune knob on that is going to the list of competition, because the problem with sales is it's history, right? So it no longer exists. So now we look at competition and say, this one's listed for this price, and then this one's underpriced and they're trying to hold back on offers. What's going to happen? When are we going to list compared to when they're taking offers? So all those kind of things become fine-tune knobs to help you make that decision. So if you had the goalposts of 950 to $1 million and you had a lot of competition, then you're probably not getting that $1 million goalpost. You're probably going to have to go a little bit less in order to make that happen. So we talked about some of these numbers: days on market, months of inventory, sales to new listings ratios. So those are all numbers that determine the pace of the market in which you're entering. And it's also important to note, like, even when you look at a category on that report, like detached homes, there are, detached homes that are 1,500 square feet and less. There are detached homes with single garages, with double garages. You've got condos, 1 bedroom, condos 1+10, condos 2 bedrooms, and they could all be doing something completely different. So the market's made up of a lot of slices. So you really want to look at different parts of the market, even within the neighborhood. I've listed a home where agents have said, well, nothing's sold in this area. And it's like, yeah, but if you look the next neighborhood over, you had the best comparable sale that happened last week. So I see all kinds of funny stuff that agents try to bring to me to justify, why their buyers offering the price that they are. So pricing ahead of the market's important too. I'm going to talk about that too. So in a market that's declining, in general, right now, as we're filming this in spring of 2024, we are up. But this was the story basically for the second half of 2023. The market was dropping, right? So what I mean by pricing ahead of the market is, if a market's not getting any better, you want to think about not wasting time, right? Even a buyer who buys in an up market, you almost want to think about paying a little bit more than the last sale, so you don't have to pay a lot more than the last sale in a month or two. So let's say that somebody priced at $999, which is a little bit above the market, and the market's going down. In order to catch the market a couple of weeks later, they might have to get to $975, but they're still not hitting that market. So then we start to see where they do something called chase the market, right? So when it finally sells, so if you think about this, is that it's really lost time and money, because if they just priced it at $980 in the beginning, they probably would have sold it. Does that make sense? So they chased down. Right. Yes. And I've seen this before. I've seen people lose hundreds of thousands of dollars because, in some cases, the market wasn't read quick enough, right? Sometimes even we got it wrong, that things can change so fast in the market that it's like, wow, like we're in a completely different circumstance right now. So, but that's what I mean by getting ahead of things, right? Even in an up market, you might have a home that's listed for what many people consider to be too much money, and then within a week or two, it can catch right up. We've seen that as well. So if you looked at, this is my job here, okay? So this is now peeking into something that I would do on a regular basis. So I meet with a seller, and in the last 60 days, similar homes sold between 1.2 and 1.3 million. The average days on market was 16. Okay, 6 out of the last 10 sales sold above asking. 27 sales, 51 new listings for homes in this category. And then 8 other similar sized homes that are close comparables. One is priced at 125 and didn't get offers on offer night 3 days ago. So where would we price this home? We've got our goalposts. So what do you guys think, if you were me, what do you think the value would be on this home based on what you see here? Do we think we're getting 1.3?
No.
No.
Right? Do we think we're getting 1.2?
1.2.
Middle? Right?
Uh-huh.
Do we underprice this home? Do we price it at fair value?
1175.
What's that? 1175?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're ready. You're ready to fire sale this guy.
Hey, you know where we are right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's so Janice, I won't say too much about the situation, but you're in a market that really just is a slower moving market, right? Like it's just that, and it's like you just need to like sometimes there's nothing you can do to speed it up, right? If the buyers are sparse, sometimes you just need to wait that market out and just know that those days are going to accumulate no matter what you do, unless you really fire sale it, right? So it's like if you get a sparse market like that, it's almost like you really need to knock a bunch of money off to get that momentum, right? Which is not always.
Location right now, I think, for us.
Yeah, I mean it's for sure. There's lots of factors. Location certainly is one, a big one. Yeah. So do you guys kind of see that? It's like you look at many factors in order to come up with your pricing choice. And so really, if I was to summarize what your options are in this case, is you could undervalue it 1175 or 999 or whatever you wanted to do there, right? You can put it in the sweet spot, right? So somewhere where you think it's priced pretty fair, maybe leaving, a % or two for negotiating. No man's land, right? So you could price it a little bit high. The only way that you're going to be successful in no man's land is if the market is going up, and then there's no chance land. And my joke there is maybe I'm not the right agent to help you if you want to do that, right? Because it's wasting everyone's time. Like I've actually sat with the seller before and I've said, I can disappoint you now or I can disappoint you in 60 days when the home's not selling, but it's like, I'd rather just tell you the truth up front. And it's like, I don't want to participate in that. It's not helping either one of us, right? So we're looking for win-win scenarios. So the game of multiple offers is really, if we look at, I call this the pricing triangle. So at market value, let's just say a little over half the buyers out there would be interested, right? And then as you go lower with your market value, you're starting to see more and more buyers that are interested. So in a multiple offer, you're trying to get offers lined up on the same night. You're trying to get buyers to compete. And so that's how you do it, is you actually put the value for less and you try and get some of the people that would only be interested, that extra 20% of buyers, you're trying to get them to come in and put offers so that the top buyers, the buyers who really love it, are going to pay the most amount possible. And if I get 10 offers on a property, I know for sure there's 1 or 2 that are really good. There's probably 1 to 3 that are not so good. And there's a bunch in the middle that are okay, but they're not making the grade. So the whole game is rigged to be set up. Even if you guys all heard the listing in Mississauga that had 85 offers earlier this year, I put that in a lot of our mail that we put out. There was probably only like 5 offers that realistically were in the game and had a chance. And all the other people were just thinking they could get it for, so it was listed at $750. It sold for like $100 less than $1 million. So $999, $900. The distribution on that would be probably 5 people above maybe 970, and everyone else would probably be less than that. Right. So it's finding those couple people that really, really want it. So when do you price fair versus when you underprice? There's some criteria that I use. Number 1 is you want to make sure you don't have a lot of competition. If you are a townhouse and you've got 5 other townhouses that are like the same model as you, it's really hard to underprice and be successful, because buyers just will go, well, I'll go buy that one instead. Right? So lack of competition, medium to high volume of buyers. So what I mean is you're in the fat part of the bell curve. So when I told you about the price ranges on the Treb market stats, that's where it is, right? People expect to pay about $700,000 to $800,000 for a condo townhouse. So if you have a condo townhouse at 1.3 million, you may not have the buyers. Right? It's just one of those things where you are not in that meaty part of the bell curve. Move-in ready or unique/rare, right? So we could make up for a home that, like, you could have a fixer-upper that's in a really desirable spot where listings don't often come up, and you can still be successful. most of the homes that do well in multiple offers are homes that are kind of move-in ready, that people walk in and they have an emotional connection with the home, where it's not just that left brain logical kind of rational decision making, is that they fall in love with these homes and they're willing to pay for it. And I would also look as a bonus one. So those are the main three, but I would also look and say, okay, out of the last 5 or 10 sales similar to this, how many other people sold using the underpricing strategy, right? So we want examples in the market to make sure that we're not the only ones that are trying this. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. I also want to point out that pricing under market value, it's higher risk and it's higher reward. And what I mean by that is sometimes buyers just don't show up on offer night, right? It's just, that's the way it is. Or they start to, overthink things a little bit and they just back away. So I'll give you an example. So in Etobicoke, we were on the buying side. There were 4 offers. We had an offer prepared for 1.2 million on this house. At the last minute, 3 offers backed away. We changed our offer from 1.2 to $1,050,000. So we dropped it $150,000 and we settled it for 125 less than the 1.2 that we had on paper. So because of 3 people's decisions, the sellers lost $125,000. Right? So that's the risk reward that you deal with when you underprice a home. So you want to look at a plan B. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but you have to be prepared for that thing, right? It's like that's a perfectly normal thing, is that you may not get the offer that you want. Okay, so let's talk about market. So the seller's market is defined as most of the homes are in the market. So even if they're high priced, or they're in poor condition, they're kind of in the market. It's like you have to try hard to not sell in a seller's market, right? Probably right now we're more in a seller's market, depending on the kind of home. Most of the homes right now for freehold homes, not condos, would be in this situation. Now, a buyer's market is the opposite. So that's only the homes that are well priced and in great condition. Those are the ones that are in, and the rest are out, right? So they're considered in less than ideal condition, and they're priced too high. Okay, so only a small percentage would sell. And then there's a third measure that we use when we collect data for our sellers. So I want to define some different levels here. So how do we know that we're out of the market? What are some signs that we're out? There would be no showings or very little showings, right? What about in the market? We're getting offers, right? So in the market would be things like getting offers. In the market would be that you're getting some second showings booked. From my perspective as an agent, what I'm getting is I'm getting calls from people. And, the agents would have that little feel out call. So it's like you can feel the nibble on the hook, where they say things like, what kind of closing is the seller looking for? What kind of price expectations do they have? Some of them will even ask the question, why are they moving? And the answer to that is really simple, just change of plans. Terry, you had a question like, would you reveal why somebody's moving? Not necessarily, right? Not unless strategically it benefits the seller or they give us permission to do that. So that's the kind of stuff that you're getting, those little nibbles on the hook. And then no man's land exists between there, where it's like you're getting showings and things look okay and the online numbers are good, but nothing is sticking, right? So we try to define that for our clients to say, okay, you know what? Where do we fit in on this scale as we get further and further into the listing? Because you just know more. Like on day 1, you don't know as much. Day 7, you know more. Day 14, you definitely know where you're at. And so we just, as the information, the data starts to evolve, we start to see where we're actually, situated in the market. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's pricing in a nutshell. Any questions about pricing before we move on? No? Okay, good. So appearance is the next thing, okay? So The Appraisal Institute of Canada, that's where all the licensed appraisers are. They take their course, everything else, but they looked at about 10,000 or so appraisals, pardon me, and said, where do people make money, right? What are the best return on investment fix-ups and improvements that people can make in their homes? And so there's 5 of them. Kitchen renovation. Okay, so if it's done smart, you could see more than 100% return on investment for something like that. Bathroom renovations, right? The next one, kitchens, bathrooms are 2 of the most important rooms in a house. Flooring is the next one. Paint. Because paint is so inexpensive and has such a huge effect, the colors and the moods and the vibe of a home, it's for sure a return on investment to do that. And then details, so light fixtures, decor. What you don't see on this list is you don't see roofs, you don't see furnaces, in many cases, you don't even see landscaping. Like the average return on investment of a pool, when they did this study, was all the way down to 25%, meaning if you spend $100,000 on a pool, the average person gets a value adjustment on their home of $25,000. Now, I think during COVID, we saw that number go up. So it probably was peaking out at 50 to 70%, but it was never the money that you spend that you're going to get back in full. Okay, so what do all of these have in common? They're all the sexy parts of the home, aren't they? Right? So it's like people aren't looking at a furnace or a roof. They just want to make sure it works. They're looking at like, wow, like what are my guests going to think about when they come to my brand new kitchen, right? Like, I mean, that's the kind of sensory experience. That's the emotional part of this whole process. So how you get a buyer to pay more is you appeal to their emotional side, right? You appeal to the benefit side, not the feature side. I also think that we talk about this a lot too, is that if your kitchen is playing at this level and your bathroom is playing at this level, then you have a congruence issue where your home is kind of creating different impressions in different areas, right? So as much as possible, we want to keep the water levels the same. So if we decide collectively, okay, we're aiming for that 7 out of 10, it's a nice home, it's move-in ready, but we're not going to overhaul it and make it like a builder's model home, that's okay, right? But the more that everything can play at a consistent level versus a different level, you're going to find that generates better results for you too. Make sense?
Yes.
80% of your success comes from being clean, bright, and clutter-free. Okay, the other 20% is all the tweaking at the end, right? So in most cases, it doesn't make sense to overhaul, but we do offer options to fully stage or hybrid stage. So we're going to get into staging as well. The cost of staging, right? So the storage cost of furniture, artwork, and accessories, like I pay more to store our stuff than I do on my mortgage, right? So it's like, it's a big investment as a business to do this. To have somebody who's certified to do a consultation, to come up with a full plan, to have every finished area staged. I don't know if you guys have seen listings where it's like they stage the primary bedroom, but not the other bedrooms. It looks ridiculous, right? So every area of a home should be finished and staged. If the stuff isn't there, extra rentals, right? So the move-in and the setup of everything costs money. That's a per hour charge. The movers themselves, the transportation arrangements, the normal wear and tear, because guess what? If you buy staging couches, they don't last forever. They definitely wear down, right? You're entering people's homes with kids and pets and all kinds of things. And so a question to ask if you're going to think about staging is, does the agent keep the staging materials in the home for the full length of the listing? Or because a lot of staging companies, if they hire them, would have a 30-day window where there's a renewal fee at the end of 30 days. I think that was a question before we started. So for our team, we actually run our own staging business. And so we would leave stuff in that home as long as it takes. We had a rural property last year where we had it in for almost a full year, right? If I was going to bill that out, that would have probably cost me, for the amount of stuff we had in that home, it probably would have been a bill of like $30,000, $40,000. if I hired a company to do that. So the moving out, the de-staging. So what we've found personally on our team, and I think a lot of agents that do this at a high level, is that it ends up being about 0.5% of the value of a house for a full stage of a home, right? So, and our philosophy at the Charlton team, and this webinar is not a sales pitch for our team, but I don't want to, like, this is not a profit driven part of the business. So I just want to charge you what it costs me, and then that's it, right? So so if you ask for staging with us, typically we would say it's about 0.5% difference on our real estate fees to make that happen. That makes sense for everyone? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
So then we look at the impact, because we want to look at stuff like marketing and staging as having a return on investment, right? So I believe the fees should represent value and opportunity for you. So, whoops, sorry about that. That was a slippery finger there. So I can't scientifically prove that staging will offer a certain percentage return back to you. Okay. It's hard to sell a house with staging and then sell the exact same home again and do it without staging. That's the only scientific way you could do this in a closed environment. It's just not possible. So what I ask clients is, would you pay more for your house if it was looking its best and it had, new couches here and it had artwork and it had all this stuff? Would you pay $10,000 more? And I really get them to put the buyer's hat on and to say, okay, let's impartially look at this and see if you can see the benefit if you were trying to buy this home yourself. There's a lot of stats out there. I pulled a couple of them here. So no agents working with buyers indicated staging had a negative effect, and 49% said their buyers paid more because the home was staged. I think that number's higher. I think that's a bit of a biased question, but the point of it is, if I look at ladder rungs, the goal with staging from my perspective is buyers tend to think of homes in terms of those rungs, right? So 1.25, 1.26, 1.27, right? Like they tend to think of those 10,000 jumps. If we just made one jump, we've paid for staging plus a little bit more. If we can knock it up 2 rungs, which I think is definitely possible, I think that you can influence somebody's decision to pay 1.27 versus 1.25 based on a really good looking home. And then at that point, now that's doubled and tripled your money. And I think if you ask me on average what people would make back for their staging investment, that's what I would think it would be. Okay. So in most cases, it makes a lot of sense to do that, but it's hard to do that sometimes if somebody can't see how it could look in the end, right? We've had a lot of people that were a little hesitant about staging. Janice, I think I heard that you guys were a little bit, and then afterwards you're like, holy cow, this was, glad we did that kind of thing.
Yeah, my husband was blown away by the staging, and he's like,
I heard that.
okay, I want to keep that. I want to keep that. So yeah, it's really worth it. It is.
Yeah. And it's like you never have a second chance to make a first impression, right? So I want to talk about good and great photography too. So obviously composition matters, but what I noticed a couple of years ago, our photographer uses this, I forget the term, I think it's called differential focus. But what they do is that the inside of a home often looks good in real estate pictures, but the outside looks washed out, right? So to get the right exposure, they kind of like, they sacrifice the outside for the inside. But what our photographer does, and he pointed this out years ago, and I look at it all the time in listings. So this is my father-in-law's condo, and he's actually across from Vaughan Mills shopping plaza or shopping mall. And so you can actually see the outside like it was your own vision, like your eyes work. And so look for that in MLS listings when you're going through. Look for that ability to see the outside just like your own eyes would see it. Right. And this was staged as well. So we incorporated, this would be a hybrid stage where we incorporated some of his furniture in with some of ours too. So that turned out really well. How much are good photos worth, right? So this was a study done by Redfin a couple of years ago, and they looked at different price points and they said, okay, let's look at how much more the homes with like an iPhone camera sold for compared to the homes that had clearly digital SLR professional photos. Look at the numbers at $1 million and more, 116,000 on average It took like that's how much more these homes were selling for. So in every single price range, it was more than the cost of photos. So if I hire a photographer just to take photos, and they would do things like video and drone and everything else, but that's probably, Natasha, how much is that? $200, $300, $400 maybe?
I would say probably around 400, depending on the size of the property.
Right. But there's nothing here that's less than $400. Everything is in the thousands. So it's like, what's a good return on investment? It's like taking good photos, right? And I think a lot about the listing process. It's like, what if you would be beheaded if it didn't sell? Like, I'm fascinated by how many people put their homes out and put bad photos out, and then it's like, and then they struggle to sell, and how much money they're actually losing, but they don't see that because, you know, it's not like they ever had a chance to make that higher amount. So that's how I think about things, right? It's like, if my life depended on selling this home for the right number or selling it at all, what would I do? I would for sure get good photos. And there's lots of other opportunities as we head into the marketing side, right? So there's lots of ways that you can get exposure. But before we do that, I want to talk to you guys about another survey that was done by the National Association of Realtors. And they asked thousands of people. They said, how did the buyer, you as a buyer, how did you find out about the home that you eventually bought? Number one was the internet, to nobody's surprise, right? The second way is, I heard about the home that I eventually bought first through a real estate agent. So 1 in 3 times the real estate agent told them about the home. They said, wow, that looks really good, let's buy it. The third way is a yard sign. Right? So that could happen with people driving by. It could happen with neighbors. Word of mouth is another part. So friends, family, coworkers, neighbors telling somebody. 1 in 10 times a home sells because somebody tells someone else about it through social channels. And we are a social species, right? And then the last one is open houses, print ads, builders, all of which were less than 1%. Right? So it would be irresponsible of me to spend 100% of the budget on print ads. Right? Does that make sense? Because it's just not doing what buyers are like. It's not mirroring and mimicking their behavior. So how do we maximize the internet? How do we maximize the yard sign? Right? All those different elements are super, super important to get the best result through this third pathway of marketing. So you're hiring us. At the end of the day, I say this to all sellers, you're hiring me to spend your money, right? Like, you give me a check to sell your house, and I have to use that money in the most effective, efficient way to get you the result that you're after. So traditionally, agents have subscribed to this plan. I call it the 3 Ps, which is put a sign on the lawn, put it on MLS, and then pray someone else sells it. Right? But there's a lot of other things that you could do, right? The for sale sign is an opportunity. We did QR codes on the sign for years before it was even cool to do them. Virtual tours, video tours, you can post that on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook. Social media, organic, and social media paid are 2 vastly different channels, right? So organic are the people that follow us, like us. Those are people that are in our trust circles, but also the paid ads would say, okay, now I want to target people within 10 kilometers of this home, women between the age of 35 and 55 who like HGTV. And if it's backs onto a golf course, I could target people that like the Golf Channel and Tiger Woods and Brooke Henderson. Like, that's what we can do. Like, that's why these companies, these like Facebook, Instagram, are worth billions of dollars, because people like me pay for the access for certain kinds of people to advertise to, right? So a 3D dollhouse tour, neighborhood alert, right? Remember, neighbors 1 in 10 times. So why don't we put a flyer in everyone's house who can see the front door of the house we're trying to sell? That would be a high value kind of marketing activity. Targeted agents list. So we actually get reports about who's selling and who's not selling, sending your listing to those agents that are actually doing the business can have a huge effect. Custom URL for your address, 123 Main Street, flyer boxes, QR codes, directional signs, open houses. Again, I don't place too much importance on the open house given the success rates. database matchmaking, even showcasing on Milton Daily Homes. I can get as many views from putting a link in Milton Daily Homes as the biggest real estate site in Canada can get in a week, right? So that's the power of targeted marketing. So we have an opportunity to get 10 to 30 times more exposure than just doing the 3 Ps. And again, if your life depended on doing this properly, does it make sense? So for a lot of this stuff, it's a pay to play game, right? If I'm going to do a video tour, it costs more. If I'm going to do social media paid ads, it costs more. So similar to staging, it's like if it costs me a little bit more, I have to pass that cost along to the customer. But the hope is if we get more eyeballs, we're going to either reduce the days on market or we're going to improve the result. Maybe we get 3 offers instead of 2 offers. Does that make sense? So sometimes those results can come as a result of more eyeballs. Do you guys ever see where there's 2 listings on the MLS? Do you guys ever see that?
Yep.
Right? Do you know why it happens?
No.
No?
They're going on the price range just above, just below that.
The double bracketing is more just like pinning it, but there's actually 2 different listings with 2 different MLS numbers. And the reason why is because Canada has about 50 or 60 different real estate membership boards, right? So we're part of 2 different boards here in Ontario, and in Milton specifically, we're part of the Oakville Milton Real Estate Board, which is connected to the Information Technology Systems of Ontario. So most of Ontario has amalgamated together and said, we're going to share MLS data. And then the Toronto Real Estate Board with their, 60, 70,000 members has said, no, we're not going to share with you guys. We're going to make our own system. So when I list a home in Milton, you will see 2 listings that we put up. And it's because we put one on the TREB system and one on the ITSO system. And that'll pretty much cover most of Ontario. So you'll get about 90% of the entire province would be able to see the listing either from one or the other. Because remember, the agents are members of these boards. So if I'm an Ottawa agent and I go to list my friend's place in Milton, if I put it on the Ottawa Real Estate Board, the local agents can't see it. It'll show up on realtor.ca with a vastly different Ottawa MLS number. Right? So the public will see it, but the local agents who are really driving a lot of the activity are not going to see it unless it's on one of these 2 systems. So does that make sense?
Yes.
So the next time you see a listing, think about it as like there's more shelf space there and it's getting a lot more exposure to a lot more people. By the way, those listings get about 10 to 50 views a day on realtor.ca. So it's not like it's every click counts, right? And we have all the access to the information, how many people emailed the agent, how many people favorited, how much photos they looked at, all of that is available. So another one that Natasha is actually working on with our team is that we're looking at finding a lot more off-market opportunities. So when you have a certain profile of home, so you have a detached home with a double car garage, with 3 bedrooms, let's say, we go into our database and we've got our buyers tagged, and every day we're tagging more and more people out of the 19,000 in that list. And to the point where basically we've got high school co-op students that are doing this over and over and over for us, in addition to the team efforts. But the point is we go to the buyers and we say, who's tagged to buy a detached home with 3 or more bedrooms and a double car garage? And we start to make introductions off the market. So I think a lot about what would happen if the MLS didn't exist. We would probably be okay because we've built this infrastructure. So thank you to Natasha for captaining this ship. Yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity for any of our sellers. Timing is the 4th one. Okay, I'll try not to be too much longer. I want to get you guys out of here. Probably we started a bit late, but we'll try and get this done in about an hour. So do you guys know what the #1 predictor of success is when you list a home?
Selling it.
What's that? Sorry?
Selling it.
Selling it. No, but what would cause a home to sell with a better result more than anything else?
Price.
Price, yeah.
When they emotionally are attached to it.
Yeah, I love that you guys have been listening. The #1 predictor that I look at as being the thing is lack of competition, right? If you have a lack of competition, I read this marketing newsletter one time, and the guy named Gary Halbert, brilliant marketer, he said something. He goes, the hot dog stand outside of the nightclub at 4 a.m., do they need all the best toppings? No. Do they need the tastiest hot dogs? No, they don't, because what do they have? They have a starving crowd, right? So that beats anything, right?
Yeah.
You don't need all the fancy bells and whistles if you're the only game in town. And so people ask this question to me, is spring the best time to sell, right? I'm going to wait till the spring to sell my house. So in the last 3 years, I've highlighted the spring markets. And what you'll notice is if we look at the new listings, which is the line, and then the sales, what are the new listings showing us in the spring? It's the highest point all year, isn't it? There's the most amount of listings that come out in the spring, which is not great for you as a seller, right? Now, what we also have is we have the highest number of sales in the spring, right? So if you look on a yearly basis, usually the peak number of sales that happen would be sometime in the spring. What I look at as the strength of a market is the gap between these numbers represents unsold inventory, right? So this was a slower market period than this, if that makes sense, right? The second half of last year was a time when a lot of homes were not successful and didn't sell. So the reason why people think that the spring is the best time of season is because they see the higher number of sales. There's more buyer activity out there, but my argument against the spring is you have a lot more competition out there. Ratio between the new listings and sales determines the overall strength of a market. Now, I want to point to another alternative. Look at December, January. Every year, right? So we actually have the tightest markets there. It never makes headlines because there's never, record-breaking sales numbers. There's less buyers in the winter, but they are serious. If they're out, they're looking to buy something. And if you can find a little section of the market that you can slide in where there's not a lot of competition, you can do very well in the off seasons. Okay, so there's not one best time to sell a home. Sometimes it's the end of summer. Sometimes it is the spring, right? Because you also, if you have a home that, school-aged families want to buy, they want to move during the summer, right? So you have to consider things like that too. First-time buyers, like a one-bedroom condo, tend to have a more consistent demand throughout the year, and they're not as prone to those seasonalities that occur. So timing the market is really an individual question based, number one, on the kind of home that you have. How many showings will it take to sell? Whoa, what happened there? There we go. So there is a direct relationship between the number of showings and the number of offers that we get. So typically we would get an offer every 5 to 15 showings, right? So what that means is that if you list your home and let's say, we have the goalposts and we decide, we're going to be in the middle of the goalposts and we had 5 showings in the first week, I could safely say to you that we're probably going to get an offer in the next couple of weeks. Okay, if the showing activity doesn't drop off. Does that make sense? Right? So I can start to read the market based on what I'm seeing. So between 5 and 15 can depend a lot on the amount of competition, right? So if you have a lot of competition, then it might take us 15 showings to get an offer. I just sold a home in an inventory-starved market. We had 50 showings and 7 offers on it. And so that was obviously a lot less because buyers didn't have as much choice in the marketplace. Now you can see some of the things we do there. There's the flyer box. Most agents just put a printout of the MLS sheet, but that gives all the information. I want them to take a next step, go to a custom website that we've built, 1408 McDermott. So we put a lot of different things on the sign to try and help, because remember, 12% of the time the buyer found out about the home through the yard sign. So the other thing is the phone number goes right to our office. A lot of agents will put their brokerage number, which drives buyers nuts. They call the number, then they speak to the receptionist at RE/MAX, and the RE/MAX receptionist says, "Can I page the agent?" And then, it's a lot better to speak to a live person whenever possible. Then there's progress reports. So again, once it's listed, now we want to see what's going on, right? So we can look at once a home's been on the market for a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever the time is, we can say how many buyers reached out to us. How many views did we get on the various platforms, social media, realtor.ca? You can look at the clicks that that happened. We could look at how many times people marked it as a favorite, liked it, shared it on social media. We can look at recent sales. So the question I was asked sellers is like, once you're listed, would you want to know if something's sold in your price range? Of course you would, right? Would you like to know if there's some new competition? Of course you would, right? So there's a lot of things, feedback from showings, right? A lot of people ask us after every showing, like, what's the feedback? And the problem with it is we probably get between 10 and 20% of the agents getting back to us with feedback. So it's like the harder you chase them, the harder they run sometimes. And when I'm representing a buyer, part of it is I don't want to give anything up, right? Like I don't want to tell you the feedback from my buyer because it's like anything you say can and will be used against you, right? So as a seller, just know we're not getting feedback from every agent that shows your house. It's just not the way it works. How often should we report? I think at minimum, we should look at the average days on market it takes to sell a home like yours. And we want to have at least 2 updates before that average time takes place. The method of communication is something that we often ask our clients. Do you prefer text message? Do you prefer email? I think a lot of times for me doing these reports, I like to do them by email. And then we talk about it afterwards. So when should you adjust your price? Again, I wouldn't make any drastic moves. I would look at the average time it takes to sell a home like yours and then make that kind of the benchmark to say, okay, what are we doing at that point? Right. And I think another thing that a lot of people don't do enough, agents and sellers, is they don't plan out the whole process, right? They just think of like, what are we going to start? What's our list price? And they don't say, okay, in 2 weeks, if it doesn't work out, we're going to do this. Or if we see these signs, we're going to do this. So plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. I've had to go all the way to plan F sometimes to get the result that we want, right? So other considerations, and then we'll wrap up. So the buying and selling plan is interesting because they work very much together. So on the selling side, we've got, the elements there, right? Timing is actually something we have to figure out for both. On the buying side, we need to say, how often is the home that you like coming out, right? And then in between there, we look at, is it better to buy or sell first? And so what will determine that? Usually the question is, what is more impactful to you, or what's the more difficult one to do? That's the one that we do first. Okay, because whatever you do second, so if you sell first and then buy, your buying window has a finite time, right? Like you don't get to let that run forever. So do the harder one first, or the one that's more impactful. So in other words, if I can't sell for this number, it doesn't make sense for me to buy anything, then you do the sell first. And then the other thing is making sure that you're aware of the costs and also that you're planning conservatively, right? So there's nothing worse than a seller saying, oh, I think I can get $1 million, and then they sell for 950 and the whole plan blows up because they didn't plan for the worst case number. It doesn't mean that they, like it's ideal or you're shooting for the low number. It means that the numbers have to work. I'd rather you find an extra $30,000 or $40,000 in this process than to be short, because being short is really stressful. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. So I did the numbers recently, actually, and I found out that 4 in 1,000 agents sold 50 properties in the last 12 months. I've been doing that pretty consistently almost my whole career, but here's the numbers. So 48% of the registered real estate agents in Ontario sold 0 properties in the last 12 months. So like half the agents out there didn't sell 1 property. And then another 30% sold 1 or 2 listings, right? Which I wouldn't consider to be mastery on any level. And only 9% of them sold more than 5 listings in the last 12 months. And so that's that's pretty wild that like a 1 in 10 shot that your agent has sold 5 properties in a calendar year. And you think about that as like a 20-year career would mean they've sold 100 properties. Like at that point, you start to kind of figure it out. But I was really surprised by that. I want to talk about real estate fees as well, right? So if you haven't sold a home in a while, or it's a new thing for you, then usually what happens is when you sell a home, you have the total fees, which are kind of divided on some level between a listing agent, the person who's helping you sell the home, and also the buyer's agent. Whoever brings the buyer is typically paid out of the sale price. The reason it's set up like that is because buyers are struggling just to make a down payment. So now if they have to pay their agent, it's that much harder for them to get to that level. So the thinking is the sellers have equity that they can usually kind of, it's an easier proposition for the seller than the buyer to pay that buyer's agent. I look at how fees are broken down, right? So the cooperating agent, the buyer's agent is taking, let's say, half the fees. And then from our end, how we run our business, for example, marketing would be about 5% of the total. The brokerage would take their piece, right? So Royal Page comes along, or Remax, or any of the other companies. Expenses, so anything from like the kind of rent that you pay to the envelopes and the feature sheets and all those kind of things. Taxes, right? None of us can avoid taxes, and our profit's about 15%. So, you know, if you hire us and you know, you sit there and say, well, it's $10,000 I'm paying you, or $20,000, it's like what we take after everyone else is paid is a relatively small portion. I'm not complaining. I'm just like, a lot of people kind of look at that big number and go, I'm paying you a lot of money. And it's like, yeah, but there's a lot of other things that need to be covered under those fees. Okay, so agents who charge less fees, right? We see a lot of that, right? I'll do it for less. I put them in one of 3 categories. So the agents are going, just as a business model, they're going to cut the time that they spend with you, right? So if their business is kind of a low fee, higher volume kind of model, they're not going to spend the time to educate you. They're not going to spend as much time communicating with you, right? Or it could be that they're cutting the marketing budget, because again, all the costs, things like brokerage fees and taxes, those don't change, right? Or the most dangerous one in my eyes is the agent's not skilled enough to protect their own money. So how well are they going to protect yours? So my little saying for this is pay peanuts, get monkeys, right? So, right? And sometimes people come to us and they ask for, you know, like, what's the lowest fees? And it's like, you have to be careful you don't take all the ammunition out of my weapon, right? Because at that point, it's like, I don't have the tools to help you on the highest level, right? So pay a fair fee and get value, right? That's what I always say. And there's you guys have seen this with marketing, with staging, you have opportunities to multiply money. And if you're selling your principal residence, what that means is it's also tax-free money. So if we could make you an extra $10,000 or $20,000 after, like, that's like after tax money, it would means you'd almost have to earn $30,000 to $40,000 at a job to make that kind of net profit. So you have a unique opportunity every time you sell your house to really drive that needle up and do really well. Final points. Sometimes agents will have gimmicks like, if I find the buyer, I'll do it for less. That's all fine and good, but at some point it de-incentivizes the agents to actually try hard to actually go find a buyer too. Choosing the agent that quotes the highest price. I mean, again, I told you, like, the no chance land is like, it's just not helping either one of us. So like, why bother doing that? Make sure you understand the reasoning behind the pricing and how things fit together, so that you can be an educated seller and be a participant in that process, not just listen to what the agent says. I have a buyer looking in the area. So has anyone ever had a flyer like that where someone says, hey, I've got someone looking?
Yep.
So my coaching to you would be great if you could do it, right? Again, you might be able to save the fees and not stage and do some of those things, but I would ask very specific questions. about like how long have they been looking, what else have they seen, why didn't they buy the other homes, right? Like flesh out if it's a real thing or if it's just an agent trying to find another seller. But legitimately, we sometimes have that on our team where it's like there's nothing out there for these people. They really want to move into the area before school starts. Let's drop some flyers and see what happens, right? So those can be good opportunities. If you're curious, I can step in and just negotiate a deal. I had this with my neighbors one time where it's like one neighbor had a sister who wanted to buy the other neighbor's home. They were like, before it was ever listed. And I asked them questions. I said, what's included in the sale, right? Are the appliances included? They looked at me like, I don't know. I didn't talk about that. What's the closing? So they were like, is there a deposit? And they didn't have an answer. I said, guys, look, pay me this much, either a per hour or a flat rate, and I will put the paperwork together, and the bank will like it more because you actually have a registered real estate professional with errors and omissions insurance that is handling a transaction versus two private buyers and sellers. Banks don't usually love those. They'll do them, but they're going to ask a lot of questions. Team and individual, right? I mean, I know I've worked as an individual, I've worked in a team, and I know what we're capable of as a team as far as service level. And I don't think there's any comparison. I think you could hire our team for the same amount that you could hire an individual agent. And there's just more specialists working on different parts of this. This is a funny one that I sometimes comment with sellers. It's like, do you ever see the agents that just their face is everywhere? Right? So it's like, I say to them, like, your fees are not making me famous, right? Like I'm concerned with making you rich, not me famous. I don't need billboards. We are the restaurant that people know about because we're honest with people. We deliver a good product. We charge fair prices. That's what drives our business, right? Is we treat people well. It doesn't drive our business, and it doesn't make sense for me to have bus shelters and like a full page ad in the paper because we know what works and what doesn't work. So all the marketing budget is going towards you and the success of your listing. And I think if any good business doesn't offer a money back guarantee or an easy exit guarantee, I think I would question that. So anyone or any agent that you're looking at, if it's not us, I know a lot of people on this call are sort of connected to our team. But like, if you're not happy, what happens, right? I've been on the phone for, dozens of hours with people that are crying saying my agent won't let me out of the agreement. And it's scary, right? I understand that the agent up front spends a lot of time and money to get a listing up, but it still has to be a win-win. And if the seller isn't happy, I think there needs to be some kind of a plan B that exists. So there you go. Questions? I did a lot of... Yes.
Sorry. Go ahead, Terry.
Oh, I wondered, Chuck, if you could touch on the new law in Ontario regarding disclosing offer prices and what your opinion is on it.
Yeah. So what happened December 1st is there's a new real estate act called TRESA, the Trust and Real Estate Services Act. And so there's not a requirement to disclose offers. So the seller gets to decide whether or not it's going to be what we call an open offer process, where any number of things could be shared about the offer. It could be the price, it could be the deposit, it could be the closing, or it's a closed process, which is the more traditional one that we're all used to, where the only thing the buyer would know is the number of offers, but no terms or conditions within those offers. So you as a seller can start off in closed, right? And have all the offers submitted and say, you know what? I think I'm going to change this to open on round 2, and I'm going to tell everybody else what the offer prices were. Or you could keep it closed. So it's like you have, as a seller, you get control over how this is going to work. Now, the interesting cat and mouse part of this, which always happens, right? Sellers try to get an edge, the buyers come back. Buyers now have clauses that they're putting in offers saying, if you share my offer, the terms of my offer with any other buyer, I have the opportunity to revoke my offer. So, you get into these interesting kind of dilemmas here where it's like strategically, what is the best move? everyone's kind of used to a closed process. So up to this point, when I've had multiple offers since December 1st, I've remained with that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So we didn't talk.
Chuck,
Yes.
question. You
Mhm.
see billboards around with agents who say, if I don't sell your home, I'll buy it.
Yes. Great one.
How is that? Like they're saying, okay, I'm going to buy it for, if say the house is worth $1 million, I'll buy it for 700. Is that sort of what they're trying to do?
Not quite at that level, but there is a kind of a built-in discount. Usually it's about 10%, right? It's like they will buy it today if they could get a 10% discount off the price. And, you know, it makes the phone ring for real estate brokerages. It's an attractive offer, I think, for many sellers. But I mean, you're trading money for convenience, right? Like basically someone's showing up with a check and saying, I'll take it off your hands today, but I'm not going to pay you maybe, you know, what you could get if you staged the home and kind of did all the right marketing and that kind of stuff. It's we call that model like an iBuyer model, where it's like, it's very kind of like, you know, wholesale pricing kind of thing.
Well, Chuck, if you're not having to do the staging and the marketing and whatnot, you're saving tens of thousands of dollars. So if you're selling at a 10% discount and you get the closing you want, how is that not a good deal for the seller?
Yeah. I mean, if you figure, you know, you're paying, you know, 4 or 5% in real estate fees, like you're going to pay on some level for the convenience of having that offer come in, right? Like if I don't sell it, I'll buy it. Like just know that your net number will be lower than if you just kind of went out to market, especially in a market like this, where it's like oftentimes what we think we can sell for. Many sellers are selling for $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 more than that.
Well, who would set the price initially that you would then be reducing it by 10%?
I would just quote that as kind of a general, like, you know, whatever the established kind of value is between, you know, seller and I'm not saying, like, every company is different. Some of them may offer 20% less. I know that for a fact there's some companies that, like, they will only buy the property. They will only guarantee to buy it if it is 20% under the kind of established, call it like the appraised value, the market value that the agent says.
And have you ever done this?
I've never done it myself. I just I know what homes I want to buy, and usually they're not ones that I list strategically for me as an investor, right? Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. And I also just don't like the idea that I'm kind of buying a home from my client. It feels weird to me to do that. Right? Like I'm hired to help and to find somebody else who wants to buy it. I don't want you to feel like, I want you to know that I'm on your side regardless, and that I'm not trying to negotiate against you.
Right. But the priority is I want to sell quickly, and I don't want to spend extra money and effort staging it and cleaning it and doing whatnot to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, there's a lot of people in those situations where the convenience of that process, you know, trumps the making top dollar, right? Okay, so steps once you get an offer. Again, some of it comes down to whether or not there's one offer or multiple offers. Nancy, you had that question, right? So we would typically look at, like, what is the right sign back. So even if, let's say that, you know, you're listed at $1 million, you'd be happy with anything above 980 based on the market conditions at that time. Typically for the sign back, we would go no lower than halfway to that point, right? So I wouldn't suggest that you sign back any less than 990, for example, right? And then from 990, you could go 987 or 985 or whatever we want to do. I think the negotiation is kind of like, it's a bit of a chess game. Like, you have to think a few moves ahead in order to be successful. And Nancy, I know we did that with the purchase of the condo too, right? As we kind of said, if they do this or if they do that, then we know what to do in those cases. So, but really an offer is only 7 or 8 things, right? It's the price, it's the deposit, it's the closing, it's the inclusions, the exclusions, the conditions, and the other terms, right? So for you as a seller, you always want the same 4 things. You want the highest price, you want the ideal closing, you want little or no conditions, because conditions will decrease your certainty but increase the buyer's certainty. If they get a home inspection, they are now much more certain about the condition of the home. But until that's finalized, that's a risk for you as a seller. Like anything that they find at the inspection, like if a light switch doesn't work, the buyer could say, well, I don't want it anymore. And then now you've lost your momentum. And the 4th thing is to have a deposit in hand, right? So you're not waiting for a deposit to come in. Those are the 4 things every seller wants. And in a multiple offer situation, that's typically whoever wins that is the one who comes closest to matching those 4 things.
But how long do you wait in a multiple offer? Like, do you say, okay, I'm going to wait another 2 weeks and see what happens? Or
No, it's always in the first week.
First week?
Yeah, because what happens if somebody sees, like if you held offers for 2 weeks, somebody could see the home on day 2, and then by the time day 10 or 11 rolls around, they've already seen a whole bunch more. So you want to get in and out. You want to appeal to them. They kind of fall in love and they don't see any other options, right? So it's, list on like a Wednesday, take offers on a Monday, like let the weekend go through. They can come by the open house, but in out is what gets the best result. And that's been tested through numerous markets many times. Some sellers think, oh, is that enough time? It's enough time, because the people who are hot for your home, they're watching the market every day. They're getting their emails. They're looking at realtor.ca. Right? You give them enough time to get in there and then, settle it, right? What else do we have here? Bridge financing. So that happens so if you had a firm sale, like the sold signs out on your home and you've bought your other home firm, no conditions or anything like that, then the bank would look and say, okay, if there's an overlap, if your purchase closes before your sale and you essentially own 2 houses, they would do a bridge finance to kind of cover you until the sale of your home, which is where all the money kind of comes out. So it's like a short-term line of credit. I would say it's about $20 per 100,000 per day is a good ballpark of how much a bridge would cost. And it can be very useful, because if the next home, if you want to replace the floors and paint and do those things, instead of moving on the same day, you can actually have both homes for a while and then ease the transition to the next one.
That's good.
Yeah.
Chuck,
Okay. Janice,
Chuck,
you raised your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens if you haven't sold your home, but you bought another one? You can't get bridge financing because you haven't sold yours.
That's right.
So what do you do?
So the absolute goal of anyone in that situation would be to get your home sold before the closing date of that purchase, or find a way to carry both homes and essentially qualify for, like, to carry both at the same time, which is not an easy thing for many people. So that hard deadline that whatever closing is there on the purchase, you have to do it within that time. And that's the risk, right? That's like if somebody buys first and then sells, it's like that's one of the downsides of doing that. But then the other side of it's not as great either. So it's like if you sold and then now you only have like 30 days to find something, otherwise you're going to have to like live in a hotel and put your stuff in storage. That's not good either, right? So it's about that, where I had those 2 circles, the buy and sell process. It's about really looking at how those pieces fit together and kind of planning conservatively for those things. What else do we have here? Average closing date. Diane, you had a question about that. So the average closing date, we can look at average days on market for a sale, and then between the time that the sold sign goes up and the closing, on average on the MLS is about 45 days. but there's a lot of variation there. So some closings are 2 weeks, some are 2 months. It can vary a tremendous amount of time. The fastest closing I've ever done has been 4 days, and the longest has been about 150 days. Right. So if you think about like, if like your home would probably appeal to like a first time buyer, let's say. So first time buyers are either with parents, right? So they could move anytime, or they're renting, in which case they've usually have to give their notice. And so that's about a 45-day average closing, because they'll kind of have 2 weeks between, they've already paid last month's rent, and then they would have the 2 weeks to move before they have to get out of the rental. So it can depend, right? Some people have sold their home and they need to buy something, and they'll come in with a quick closing. It can really depend. And as a seller in more of a seller's market, you tend to dictate some of those terms a little bit more than the buyer. Like you can kind of say, hey, I want this. And if the buyer's really kind of struggling with being able to buy a home, then they might give you what you're looking for. Okay, I think that's about it for questions. Anything else?
Just wondered how you decide on the amount of a deposit, and if they back out, is the deposit yours as the seller?
Great question. So not automatically. So you would have to prove damages, right? And there was a court case in BC years ago where there was a $40,000 deposit on a condo. And so the buyer couldn't close the deal. And so the seller tried to sue him. By the time it reached court, the guy actually sold his condo for $80,000 more than the deal that fell apart. And the judge said, you're not getting $40,000. The buyer actually helped you by not closing, right? So,
Yeah.
So the deposit was given back to the buyer, because a seller has to prove damages, right? So if you were to let's say buy a property and you couldn't close on that, it can actually become a domino effect of lawsuits that can happen right down the line, right? It's like you made me not close, now I couldn't close. That guy sues me, and then he couldn't close, so the guy sells him or sues him. So it can be a big mess if one of those dominoes kind of doesn't fall right. But to answer your question, so as a seller, it's been proven many times in court that whatever you can prove as damages, and we've seen this, right? Like when markets change, when the buyer paid it like the peak price, and then the home went down $300,000, and the buyer said, well, I don't want to buy it anymore. The buyer has to pay $300,000 plus expenses and all those other things. Like there are numerous court cases that have equivocally said the seller should not have to pay out of pocket for the buyer's broken promise. Right? So how much for a deposit? Typically, we would look between 2 and 5% of the value of the property would be kind of a normal deposit. And that can vary by region. So in Toronto, sometimes it's between 5 and 10%. There were years where like you could go to Barrie and put $1,000 deposit down on a property, right? So there's a geographic element too. I would imagine like probably in Niagara, like it's normal to have, maybe a $5,000 deposit or $10,000. So the closer you are to the GTA, generally it's a little bit more, but in Milton standards about 2 to 5%. And I want more, right? More is better to have in the bank account, because even if you didn't want to go to court to sue for damages, that sometimes you can say to the buyer, we both agree that you will give me that deposit because you didn't fulfill your promise. I had that years ago where a seller, the buyer lied about their job, and so CMHC found out and blacklisted the buyer, so they could not get a mortgage because of fraud. And so the seller said, okay, we're holding $25,000. We're going to put the home back out on the market. If we can sell it for a similar price, we'll kind of see what happens, right? So the sellers ended up selling for the exact same price as before. And they said, we've incurred legal fees of $4,000 and we want an extra $10,000 and we'll give you the rest of the money back. So the sellers, instead of going to court, which basically lawyers are the only ones that make money in court, they said, we're going to settle this and we'll still come out ahead, but we're not going to like unfairly punish you as a buyer. So that can happen too, right? Settlements do happen. And if you have more deposit, it gives you leverage, right? Like if a buyer only had $1,000 or $5,000 in the trust account, it's a little harder to squeeze blood from that stone, right?
Right.
So yeah, for sure. What else? Anything else? Was that a valuable class? Was it good? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Very much so.
It was
Do
my
again.
first time, so who knows,
Yeah.
right? I
Do it again.
rely on the feedback. I believe Natasha's going to send out a survey on Monday, so if you can spend a couple minutes just kind of, filling that out, giving us some feedback. Be honest, please. Be appreciated. And then if you guys need to reach me, most of you guys have me in your cell phone anyway, but that's how to reach me. And you can scan that QR code and just book a Calendly appointment anytime you want. It goes right into my calendar. Okay, I think we'll wrap up. Natasha, any final thoughts?
I thought that was great. I'm ready to sell my house and I don't even have one.
Oh boy, that's good.
I know a good agent.
Thank you. Well, you know a few actually.
I do actually, yes.
Okay, guys, let's wrap it up. And thank you so much for attending. And offline, if you have any questions or anything, just you know how to reach me. Okay, thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks,
very much.
Natasha.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.